going to have a lot of regret, a lot more complications later on in life.
And I can't be around you because I despise being pregnant. There's nothing about pregnancy that I like.
It was different and it was faster and it wasn't what we were expecting. And, you know, and looking back, it was kind of ideal.
For our listeners that have made it this far, Drue and Jeena are no longer holding hands.
Do you want me to head out with one of these Reddits to prompt?
Yeah, let's start.
Because they're juicy. All right, juicy Reddit stories. Here we go. Entitled, Reddit number 1. How did you decide to not have kids? I'm 31 this week. I don't think I want to have kids for various reasons. Mostly 1, ouch, so much they don't tell you in sex ed about what your body goes through. 2, I'm a sleepy gal. Kids should be super loved, and that takes a lot of effort and time, which sounds overwhelming. 3, honestly, state of the world. Afraid of bringing kids into the world when it feels like it's crumbling, both environmentally and financially. All that said, part of me is still thinking about how I could cope with those things and wondering if I could get there. The idea of a family is beautiful, and I know my fiance would be the best dad ever, but I'm worried I'm romanticizing things. Insights appreciated. Thanks.
I feel like there's a lot of things. One of the things I recognized that she said was the fact that she felt like it's a lot of work, and almost in a way it's like it's a lot of work and I don't think I'm ready or I want to do that. I think that's like a good enough reason right there. Like she was very honest. And, like, I do like the fact that she thought, like, oh, I think my fiance would be a good spouse. But that's not a reason, or that's not a good enough reason to decide to have kids. Because even though I think Drue's a very, very great spouse, it doesn't make being a parent easier for me. Because it's like, okay, they have a great dad. But, like, I also need to make sure that, like, I need to be a great mom.
You wanted to be a mom.
Yeah. And so then if she ends up doing this for her spouse or fiance and they may be a fantastic dad or even better. I mean, there's also a chance that he may not be as great of a dad as she thinks he's going to be. But in the end, it still would be her pushing herself to do something that I don't think she kind of wants to do at this point. And, like, it doesn't sound like it.
It doesn't seem like a radical yes. And for parenthood, it almost feels like it's kind of got to be like a, like, heck yeah. Like parenthood versus, like, I don't really know. I guess I'll try it. It's like, that's a...
That's hard. That's hard to put on kids.
No, but I didn't hear anything major that would stop her from having kids either, though. Like, yeah, you're not hearing like the heart into it, but like she's recognizing that she's having these feelings as well.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of thought behind what she's saying. So I think that's what's hard for me is you're right. It's not an extreme yes or extreme no. Mm-hmm. You almost feel like someone would need to have that before having kids. Like be adamant either way. Like, yes, I want kids.
Just feels like not a very wishy-washy decision. Like, it's hard to just be like, let's see how things shake out.
You can't do that.
Like, you can't, you know, there's no like, oh, let's scrap it. I don't love it. It's not a career you're trying on. Like, so in my perspective, it feels like from her angle, there's nothing here that is like, for sure she shouldn't. But if she is thinking, maybe for sure I shouldn't, that feels like enough to be a no. Like maybe
it should be more of I feel like if it's not a resounding yes, it should be a no. There shouldn't be a middle because of the fact that they're like human beings, like little kids who have no choice in this, like in the matter or anything, that they'll just be coming into this world. And then all of a sudden they're having a person who's like, I don't know if I want to do this. Like the person who suffers is not only the person who's taking care of the parent or the adult, the child suffers too.
I would be very interested to hear from her fiance because it almost sounds like she's getting some pressure from somewhere and she's seeking for someone to tell her no.
Yeah, I
like
agree.
she's seeking for someone to be like, no, you
Someone
shouldn't.
tell me the decision for me because it's like I should, but I don't
I'm
really
at this age. If I'm going to have kids, I better have kids
31.
now. But you know, maybe it's a friend of hers that's like, girl, you're getting old. Like, you better have those kids while you're ready. And you're going to wait till later in life.
Person. Think about how many times
someone doesn't have to say it out loud. You feel it anyways, not only biologically, but sociology.
Kids.
Like, but if you've been long time partnered and you're heading towards your 30s, I think it crops up. What do you think? Are we asked that often? Not anymore, really. I think with key people in our life, we've had enough conversations that have just kind of been like, we're on our own time. Thank you. And they just learn the lesson and stop asking. But maybe if we weren't so firm, people would ask more.
Yeah, we're pretty private people, so I think sometimes there's a like tendency to maybe people wouldn't necessarily ask me a question.
Well, you're
that.
private.
You're extremely private.
I was like, I feel like I'm a pretty open book.
People. I don't really get open-ended questions about if I'm gonna have children or not.
Yeah, and I would share if someone asked me pretty transparently.
Yeah.
'Cause I am a bit of a
That
open
also
book.
could be a gender thing.
I think so too.
Yeah.
I was gonna say that. I think
Yeah.
usually a lot of women get asked, when or when you have kids, are you done?
I'm trying to think when I'm out and about with our own kids, it's probably women more that ask me, "Are you all done? Are you gonna have more?"
Mm-hmm. It's like
Right.
complete strangers, invasive questions.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Unless it's another dad that has kids.
Do you get a lot
Rarely.
of boy? You have
but
your
that
hands
might be
full.
me joking with people more than anything else.
Well, it's because
Like, are
Drue
you
is-
done
You're
yet?
the instigator.
I'm the instigator.
Drew's very
my fault.
for like having another kid right now, and I'm like, I don't know.
Not getting any younger.
Yeah, Jeena, don't forget it.
Y'all can't be starting on me too. No. It's
Look, when I married you, like I accepted that you're a little bit older than me.
3
and-
weeks, y'all. 3 weeks. That is it.
And there's sacrifices
Drew,
that have to be
that
made.
is generous that you took
Yeah.
that into account. I just think it's shocking you're sitting here today. The hand breaking.
For our listeners that have made it this far, Drue and Jeena are no longer holding hands.
It's just because it's like for each of our kiddos, I feel like when we got married, we knew we wanted to have kids, and we also knew we wanted to have a large family. It wasn't anything. I don't feel like I felt any pressure. I think if anything, I felt more pressure to have like only 2 kids. When we had Panda and Badger, it was like
People are like, you did it.
You did it. It's perfect. You have a perfect family. Like you can stop.
One boy, one
One
girl.
boy- yeah, we heard that all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, you guys are done, right? Like you're
Yeah.
done. Like it's like, are you gonna? And it's always me. Are you gonna go like get snip? Like go get like a what's not vasectomy? It's like a
People ask you if you're getting
yes. And then when I
Tubes
tell
tied.
them
In the
When I
grocery
tell
store line.
Drew's gonna be getting the vasectomy, I'm like, and Drew's doing it. I already did my work. They're like, you're so selfish. Why would you make your husband do that? I'm like, well, then I'm selfish. My
That
husband's
is
gonna get a
shocking
vasectomy.
to me.
What?
It's
Yeah.
crazy. Drew's like,
Because
as
what
soon-
has Drue contributed in the overall process at this point? Child bringing. So the snip is, the very
Well-
least he could do.
What was the reasoning? Tell them the reasoning why you decided that you were getting a vasectomy instead of me getting my tubes tied.
Oh, I mean, in nursing school, like, I got to see like the doctor just go in there and like pull everything out.
Of women.
Yeah. Like, so when
my
they're doing
gosh.
a C-section, the doctor has to check that everything's intact. And so he literally pulls everything out and like lays it on the table.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was just
man.
like, that's what they.
Could never be that kind of doctor.
And so like they're so advanced with surgeries. It's like with males, it's like laser, microscopic, like maybe 2 little pinholes or slits or whatever, and like
so easy.
24-hour recovery. That's it.
Wow.
You
Which
know,
crazy because they
Also,
get
there's
so
a
much pain
higher
medication.
success rate, I think, with vasectomies than.
And can be reversed. It's just the reconnecting.
And it can be
of-
reversed. So there's just
no
It just seemed-
downsides.
yeah, it just seemed other than like pride and like quote unquote manlyhood that
Patriarchy.
why wouldn't you?
I'm just adding parentheses. I said
Parentheses.
patriarchy.
She said on the record.
Not true
On the
manhood. Patriarchal ideologies about men.
So
Yeah.
It really is that. And so then she was just came home and was like, Jeena, I just saw this woman have a C-section, and then they just pull the ovaries and pull the tube,
Tuck it all
everything.
back in.
And he's like, they were not gentle. And he's like, I know that the choice of having a C-section is not mine and may not even be yours at sometimes. Like, because, complications happen.
These things happen.
Well,
yeah.
right. But he's like, but for.
And these things are chosen. I don't want to
Yeah.
always make it feel like C-sections are the
Yeah,
the
and
plan
some,
B.
Yeah, some women
Yeah.
they're
Chosen.
choosing, and that's not anything bad. It's just it's traumatic for your body. It really is,
Absolutely,
and
without
it's
doubt.
way more traumatic than having a vaginal birth. Not better or whatever, but it's just physically
Invasive,
It is
certainly.
does a little. It takes a little bit more from your body to recover from a C-section than it does from a vaginal birth. And once Drue saw what the doctors did, came home and he was just like, if we don't have to have a C-section, like I would really like it, like if you didn't have to have one, but if you choose to have one, I'll support you. And then he was like, and also too, I would really rather I have a vasectomy than you have your tube tied, because I saw, like, he's seen like your mom who she had to have she had a bunch of complications and stuff like that. And he's like,
she ended up having to have a hysterectomy at the age of, I think she was under 40,
Wow.
because when they tied her
Which
tubes,
hormonally is.
when they tied her
Yeah.
tubes, they did something in there and it got infected and she started to get cysts, and then like it was bad, and so she went, had to take hormone replacement
Yeah, I was gonna
go through
say.
menopause early basically, and
because we just use the planning. What is that called? Like
Family planning.
family
family
cycles.
plan- like
Yeah,
family cycle. We
that-
do that,
yeah.
and then we use condoms, and we've been like very successful with it.
Yeah.
Like
At least the
people
past
will
couple
say,
years.
people say maybe not so much because we have so many kids, but no, honestly, like
Yeah.
I would definitely say, except for baby number 2, which I was learning that like your cycle and breastfeeding, you know,
You can still conceive.
you can still
Yeah.
conceive, right? Except for her, like, I mean, honestly, we were going to have as many kids as we did, so it wasn't like it was like an oopsie, because I wouldn't call it an oopsie.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just like, oh man, I
You
didn't
weren't
know.
like sitting down and being like, let's conceive a child. It's
Yes,
different than
right,
like,
but
I'm pregnant.
but she was definitely someone that was playing because we knew we wanted to have a lot of kids.
Right.
But we've been very successful with family planning and condoms that we technically could go that route, but it's just also too is just like to make sure that we don't have to worry about any like scares, because I get still scares. I still get scares. I don't know what it is.
It's like a whole human life. I think
Yeah.
that makes sense that you'd get scared. Like,
and it's just scary when like some days when your period's like 2 or 3 days late.
mhm.
Nothing's worse than that feeling. You're just like sitting there waiting and waiting and waiting. And so we just decided
I'm just
that
chilling.
he is always chilling. And it's
Like we're all good. We're all good.
so annoying because I want you to freak out with me, Drew.
Because I know when we get pregnant. Like I know.
You see that, guys? He knows.
He knows.
I
He
know.
Drew's a
knows.
confident dude.
I know.
What can you say?
You can't lie. This last time I told you were pregnant before you knew.
With Penguin?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but you didn't know with Cal.
Yeah, but each
So
baby
let's
I get
invalidate the one you
better.
did
My
know.
indicator gets
Because,
closer
but
and
don't forget
closer.
you didn't know them all.
Yeah. and you did not think I was pregnant with Badger either.
That's because you told me it was impossible.
But you know. But you
Yeah,
know.
you said it's impossible. And
I
we
did
were like,
not say it was
let's
impossible.
do it,
Did I say
baby.
it was impossible?
Why
I
didn't
said
you know
like the
anyways?
likelihood of getting pregnant while you're breastfeeding was really, really low. No one told me how like I ovulate through storms. Doesn't matter. I could literally ovulate. I'm pretty sure I'm one of those people who ovulates while they're having their period because I just
Just one big long ovulation.
I'm always ovulating.
Let's just
It's
keep
so
saying the
annoying.
word ovulate over and over, deep into the microphone,
ovulation.
over and over.
And so I think that's what. But I mean, going back to like the whole
Like
whether or not to have-
conclusively, is if it's not a radical yes, is that what we're landing on?
Yeah,
Does
I
anyone
think
feel
so.
differently than that.
I have some
Like-
thought. No, I just first I wanted to say I appreciated that OP referred to themselves as a sleepy gal.
Yeah.
I love that. I like that. Yeah, I'm a sleepy gal. I feel like there's two like this premise of should I have children or not feels like in my mind like there's two arenas or factors or whatever. First, there's this idea of like how do I make decisions I'm confident I won't regret, right? And that's like decision making, and everyone approaches that I think just very personally, right? Like I can't share any ideas about how to make decisions you will or won't regret that will for sure work for you. I think that's like a deeply personal way of exploring our autonomy as humans. That's that first idea. And the second idea that came to mind is that there are unique concerns about having children that the poster here points out, like
The irreversibility.
social and economic and environmental concerns. Yeah, well, irreversibility I feel more goes in that first bucket of like, will I be sure I won't regret this? Either way, will I be sure I won't regret having a child? And will I be sure I won't regret choosing not to? It's such a permanent decision. But then there are these like concerns of like, could I be an effective parent? Will I remain sane? will I be
Yeah.
introducing my children to a world that I feel like, excited to bring them into, or are there concerns about devastation on some scale? I don't know which bucket feels better to talk about, but I feel like those are the two things that are kind of at the root of this decision-making process.
Well, I think you're like really beautifully segueing into, I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts about the decision-making process itself. Did innately you just grow up, and did it feel assumed, or did it feel facilitated and really chosen? Like, what was it when you were entering, maybe for you guys it was marriage, so for others it could be a different social institution that's leading them to like, I'm an adult now, children. But for you, maybe it was like being married young. And then was your next thought, it felt just natural? Was it like, I've dreamed of this day? What led you to, was it a weighty decision, children or no children? Or was it just feel
Gina's
natural and easy?
smiling.
She
I'm
was
laughing.
smiling big time.
I'm laughing because we both, like, when we were engaged in dating, we were like, we want kids, and we want a lot of kids. The timing for, like, at least for Panda, like, if we found out, we were not, like, like
We
it was
weren't
just
established. We
weren't
didn't have
established, yeah.
anything.
Yeah.
and
So faster than maybe you would have
Yes,
like
for
envisioned.
sure.
Yeah.
and it was kind of like, okay, this is what we wanted. And so we were kind of like, well, is this like a good time? And it always comes back to like, there's never a perfect or good time. And so we're like, well, since there's never a good or perfect time, even if like we feel like definitely right now is not the perfect time, will there be a perfect time later on? And we didn't think that there would be. And there were like there's positives and like there's pros and cons to having a kid really early on.
Always.
And
About every
marriage,
topic.
and then but later on as well, that it was just kind of like it wasn't like it happened a lot earlier than we wanted, but I also felt like it happened at the perfect time. Because I think, one, it helped me I was prepared to be a mom, but also pushed me into certain ways of like maturity a little bit faster. And I like that because sometimes I'm one of those people like, I need external like pushes to like want to do certain things. And like that was like an external push for me, like knowing that our baby was coming.
How do you feel as someone who you didn't like explicitly make the decision to become parents?
it wasn't
but
like,
you were
let's
parents,
conceive.
and it worked for you.
So
Well, the only thing with that I would say is we had planned to become parents because this is something we talked about before we got married.
Okay.
Yeah, just we knew we were going to be parents. And married and together, and
Yeah.
so it wasn't a question of if we were going to have
The
kids. It was
timeline
more
was just-
when.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
And
it's a
then-
win things.
So when it happened, it was more like, oh, I guess that's now. Like that's probably not ideal. Like not when we wanted at that time.
Right.
But it was happening, and it's
I think it
something,
speaks
you know,
as a side note to y'all's characters, because for Jeena to say it was different and it was faster and it wasn't what we were expecting, but then to say, and in looking back, it was like kind of ideal. Like it grew me, it's all kind of shaken out. And I'm curious, what are your thoughts or feelings about if a similar scenario happens and they can't get over that their life trajectory has been kind of like derailed, or they're always resentful or like grieve the life that they lost when the timing was different than they thought. For you have a beautiful perspective, but for many, I imagine this would be like an insurmountable hurdle. It's like, I had a baby when I was not planning to have a baby, regardless of my prior hopes. It just like was soon, fast, expensive. I missed out on opportunities. Like I can never go back and fix that. What thoughts do you have on maybe like navigating that, or do either of you have any thoughts?
I had a friend when I had Panda who was going through that. Like she was really, really young, and same thing. They got married and they knew that they want to have kids, but after she had her first, and I think she might have been pregnant with her second, where she's like, I'm happy to be a mom. This is what I wanted, but I definitely don't feel like I regret the timing
Absolutely.
of it, right?
Yeah.
And it was kind of hard because I had such a positive spin. And I also was like, oh, like, because even though this is definitely what I wanted, didn't have at the time that I wanted, I'm still okay with it. It's helped me push. I also didn't feel like she was wrong in how she felt.
Yeah.
Like I try to validate her and like, oh, like, yeah, I can definitely understand that you didn't get to do this, or you weren't able to do this, or you feel very stuck because you don't feel like you've had so many experiences in doing things before you settled down to become a mom and taking care of your kids. Because it was really, really, really hard. This woman, her spouse was like in school, and like there were long days at school, and then my spouse is in nursing school and then working as well, so both school and work, and we were alone. We were both two moms with a child, young, and
poor, right?
No money,
no resources,
no nothing. It was like it sucks that we're like, not that we were parents, but sucks like kind of like you're in this phase of life where it's just hard. And we knew also that it wasn't always going to be like this. So it was kind of like, this is only going to be for a certain amount of time. But like when I would talk about it, I was like, but I still really like this. This is really, really hard, but I'm happy it's happening now.
Yeah.
Like I'm definitely happy. But her perspective on it was like, I wish I didn't have my kids right now.
Yeah.
I wish, I would have been able to do a bunch of other things. And I felt like her feeling that way wasn't wrong, but it's also maybe the reason why I'm probably very pro-choice, is because this idea of like we have to have kids, and this idea of like we have to push ourselves because this is like what other people want, it's pushing people to do things that they're not ready, and it's causing people to have like the lives, like be very unhappy. Children are unhappy. Resentment. It's like causing where people are just not having unhappy lives, but it's also affecting other people who have they had no say in the matter. And I just feel like this idea of like, oh, you're pregnant and you should be completely happy and like this is like a blessing. We have to acknowledge that one person who may see it as a blessing does not mean everyone else has to see it as a blessing. It sucks when people are like, this is a blessing, you should be happy. Like that's
why I was curious about your opinion, because for you, your conclusion was like, boy, that really worked out. That's the best thing that happened to me.
And you've always talked really positively about those Alabama days. Like,
but they were hard.
They were hard.
So hard.
And I didn't know you until
Georgia
sometime later.
Answer.
So that period of your lives to me has always seemed very like mythic, like
the mysterious.
It was really challenging for you, but you were really grateful for it. So it's always been so mysterious.
The Down by the River Wilders.
Only had really positive things to say.
But what's
the
crazy,
van,
Drew
the van down by the river.
Drew will
Truly,
tell you this, I don't steer away from hard things. If it's hard, like if I know this, like it's going to have a great outcome at the end, like I will just do it. Like pregnancies, I've gone through a lot of pregnancies, knowing because I have hyperemesis. I know I'm going to probably go through a depression. I know it's going to I'm going to be losing a lot of weight.
Body,
my whole body. I know it's going to be hard, and I still choose to do it. But then I also just recognize that some people don't want to do hard things. Why is that so bad to recognize?
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that,
especially when it comes to bringing a whole child.
It did bring a question in my mind. I know you said you validated, but is there any advice you could or did give your friend that did help, or she said helped at all?
I don't know if it
like
helped her, because in reality, the only thing I could do is validate. I can't make a decision for her. I can't say.
And her circumstances can't change.
Yeah, that's what.
No, but like, did you like build community with her, like hang out with her more, like
we hung
because you're
out a
like,
lot.
oh, you're like feeling a little depressed, like just come over to my house, or you want me to come over? Like, was there anything like
or complain
that?
about the pregnancy? like, I'll hear you, honey. Like, tell me, how bad it is. I got you.
I did do that, but that was something that I would have done even if she had or hadn't complained, because I think it's like
that's the kind of
pregnancies,
friend you are.
like as women, like will complain about your pregnancies.
Yeah.
I think I know like maybe one friend of mine who like loves being pregnant. And she's a friend that I don't like to be around when she's pregnant.
Yeah, we only have one friend we knew who's enjoyed.
Had a fabulous pregnancy.
I know you were thinking of
the same person. Are we thinking of the same person?
Probably not.
No, I don't.
You don't know our person. So.
Okay. Because I know you know the person.
But we can compare notes afterwards. Yeah, I'd like to know.
She loves it, and I can't be around you because I despise being pregnant. There's nothing about pregnancy that I like. It's miserable for me. But it's also like, because I'm one of those people that can look at like past all that, because I know there's something at the end of the rainbow, like this new person that I get to like meet and get to support and guide. And like, I don't know, I like that part, that like the beginning part of like the whole because that part sucks so much, I'm willing to ignore it or tough it out. But like, I would have done basically what I told her, or how I helped her with being a friend, having her come over all the time. I would have done that whether or not she had expressed that. And so she did come over a lot. We became pretty close, and then we ended up not being close afterwards. I think you know who I'm talking about. And she ended up having, I don't want to say too many, so she doesn't know
more kids or less kids.
She ended up having more kids afterwards.
Yeah.
And so I think it worked out for her.
I'm curious, from people that listen to this podcast, I would be so appreciative of feedback from Diverse Thoughts. If someone has been in the situation of, I had children in a circumstance that wasn't ideal to me. It's not what I had in my mind. It's not what I dreamed about. Are there coping mechanisms or things that you've done to self-soothe, or resources you've used? And also, what do you wish could have been done? Is there something that your community, family, friends, people around you could have done to bridge that gap? They can't change it. I mean, clearly, right? Especially if you've progressed to a certain point in pregnancy legally, you can't do anything. So it is what it is at some point. And so I'd be curious, because I think here in this discussion, our experience is like somewhat limited, but I think our desire to understand that better, people would benefit from this being a point of conversation. And we can even circle back to it in other podcasts with different guests. I think it's a point people would be curious about.
Yeah, I haven't, from what you're saying, Jeena, like your friend at that time was having a parallel experience to you, but had a really different feeling about it. Like maybe that feeling of, I did regret it. Like going back to that first bucket of like, how do I make a decision I know I won't regret? And what if I end up regretting a decision I made? We might not, like, she might not still regret it, right? Like, I mean, as we grow and as we see things differently, that comes to my mind. But also, I think when we lived with you guys, And I don't remember if it was the pregnancy between
Cow?
no badger and cow,
Yeah.
because there was a pregnancy there that was really rough.
Mm-hmm.
It was such a dark and challenging time for you guys, but it was the time that we got to know your kids, your oldest kids, the best, and spent a significant amount of time with them. That's always been really special to us too. We were able to connect with them. It was really, really cool, despite what you guys had going on. So that's like your idea of community, kind of helping ameliorate these challenging circumstances.
Yeah. And the more we talk, I think the more I come back to what you said earlier, Blake, about decision making being key even before, because like we ultimately can't answer for this. The person that posted, because it's such an individual decision. What is interesting and unique is when two people come together and then you either are on the same page or you're not, or if you're not on the same page, how do you get on the same page and work together?
I think that we've come together, figured out is that unless that we were both on the same page, like we both wanted to have a child, we would not have a kid.
Yeah.
So like, especially with like after like Panda, if we both were not like, yes, then I was like, no. Like, even if I feel like I wanted to have a kid, the idea of only one of us, like, kind of like gung-ho wanting to have a kid.
And the other's like, I guess.
Okay, sure. It sounds so icky to me.
Yeah.
Because it's just like...
It's a big ask.
It's a big
from
ask.
the shared.
And it's also a big ask where once that baby is here, it's just like, oh, man, like, I'm asking something of him or them or her or whatever. And they're like, okay, fine. Like, it just builds up resentment so much where you just feel like, well, they never wanted this baby anyways, that's why. Or I never wanted this baby and I don't want to do this.
Me.
Do you think it was, you said after we had Panda, which is our first child, do you think you say that because then you realize how much was going into having a child that you were like, if I'm not on board or you're not on board, this is not.
I think that,
like,
but I also just think that that's how it should be. That I don't think it should be just one person just be like, I want to have a baby, and the other person's like, okay, I guess. Like, this is a
you need some affirmative.
And and that's just me. Go ahead.
This is a conversation Blake and I have all the time, and I think it's felt isolating when we first had this conversation, because most of the models that I saw were people that, honestly, not very many that both didn't want. I saw very few child-free couples that had intentionally decided to be child-free modeled. I heard no discourse around differences of opinion. And so it was profoundly lonely, because early in our marriage, we've been together 9-10 years and married 8. So early in our marriage,
off the record,
there was
you've doxed us
a lot of discussion. We came at it from different angles, but that piece of Blake saying, maybe you can mature with time and feel different later about your child rearing experience than you did maybe 5 years ago, 10 years ago. That's happened for us, but not without ever introducing a child into the picture. How Blake and I talked in dating, how Blake and I talked in the first 3 years of our marriage, and how Blake and I talk now is like profoundly different. We've grown into different people with new concerns, new interest, new self-awareness, new couple awareness. We've learned things about each other. I don't hear that being talked about very much, like the behind the scenes of the child making decision. Child making is a little sexual. Child bringing a child decision to have a baby or not to have a baby. But like, should we have a baby or not? And how do couples go about talking about that? And what do you do if you disagree?
I'm still feeling like, so I'll add a third bucket to my little mental
keep
model.
Us going.
That we have this basic idea of how do I make decisions I feel confident I won't regret? Or maybe I'll change my mind on it later with new perspective and age. The second one is just, there are some unique challenges to thinking about having a kid that relate to our world and your circumstances, maybe your economic circumstances. And the third one is like, how do I sync up with my partner or partners if you're not like sure about monogamy?
The third, let's skip to the third, because I just was kind of interested in that, and I'm curious about the next Reddit story. The other one that we had to share is about that difference of opinion. So if one partner wants to and one doesn't, where do we go from here? My husband doesn't want kids, but I do. My husband and I have been married for almost 8 years. We talked about the subject before getting married, and he expressed he wanted kids with me. But for the last 2 years, he's been saying he doesn't want any kids. He thinks kids are expensive, doesn't have the patience, and he is very selfish with his time. I find that interesting. That's pretty subjective, but an interesting note. Editor note. I'm almost
Courtney's
30.
giving your editorials.
I'm like, okay, she says her. I wonder what her husband thinks. Is he selfish? Who gets to determine that?
He's a gamer.
That's important to,
He's a pro
to think.
gamer.
For money, Drue, a monetized gamer, that contributes greatly to the household.
Yeah.
I'm in defense of the husband.
He prefers esports.
I thought she was reading. I thought she was.
no.
Oh.
Also,
I was like, wow, I
cut
was on
this.
point there.
No, I just think this is fascinating. And I'm pulling it out as a point that we can pin and come back to, because how someone spends their time, is it their life, and is it okay to be selfish about how you spend one's time? And that's often related to parenting. And should I have children or not?
Yeah.
Are you
Is it okay to be selfish with your time? Is that a shameful thing? It is okay to enjoy spending your time in your own pursuits and happiness.
As a parent, my answer is at times.
Okay, yeah.
times it is
There's not a
okay, yeah.
clear.
And so I'm just fascinated
But
that she brought that point
The
up
way
here.
I'm reading that, and I don't know what point you're making. The way I'm reading that is she resents the way that her partner spends her.
I
that Their
agree.
partner spends their
This
time,
seems like
right?
a point of tension. So
Well,
I
it
just want
seems
to
like
note.
for her is because
She's
he's spending
frustrated.
his time in other things, that's what's making him not want to have kids.
Correct.
Yeah.
It
So
seems like
that's
she's
what it is.
hanging her hat on he's selfish with his time. So I want to and she wouldn't have included that if it didn't feel like a significant point. So I'm making note there.
Yeah, and maybe we're reading way between the lines.
Maybe.
But
Maybe.
But that's what we're here to do. So,
yeah. You're welcome to take or leave any of the hot takes.
so then she goes on to say, I'm almost 30 years old and I want to have kids before I turn 35. This year, I asked him several times if he had changed his mind regarding becoming a parent, and he clearly stated, my answer is final. I do not want any kids. I feel lost, as I do want children of my own. For the longest time, I thought I could live without becoming a mother and stuck to his idea of living child-free, but I think I just wanted this to work. I do picture him as a father and want that with him, but now I'm getting older, I think I will grow to resent him if I don't have kids. We discussed this topic, and I explained that we both wanted different things in life, and his response was, well, maybe we will have one in the future. I explained that it was easy for him to say that, but that I'm a woman, there we go, and our clocks work differently. Also, this doesn't mean he is all in for it. He could change his mind again. I expressed that I needed a firm answer, and he couldn't really answer. I love him, but this has me very discouraged. A couple days ago, we cried because it's a huge topic, and I said I couldn't see us together if we wanted different things. He said he didn't want to lose me and couldn't imagine life without me, and that broke me. Now he's saying, let's have a kid in a couple years. But now I'm not sure if his decision is honest or if he's just saying that to keep me. I don't want to stay in this marriage and have him resent me later on if I do end up pregnant. This is complicated, but yeah,
that's
there's
a
a lot
lot.
here.
I already know what I
that's
would
a
do.
lot.
I just want to draw attention to that sweet little line where she said we cried. Oh man, like there's been.
Tell us about that. Why does that stand out to you, Blake?
That's just so sweet, like that they cried together over something that's causing them both, like, to really stretch their understandings of their relationship and each other.
And I
That
appreciate
might be impassable. Who knows?
I appreciate you brought that up because it's easy when reading this story to like almost demonize and stigmatize and be super frustrated
bag
and
on
feel
the
like the
dude,
husband's
yeah.
lame. Like this dude is keeping her back. He's stringing her on. That's inappropriate for him to feel this way. It's selfish for him to feel this way. This poor girl who just wants to have a baby and thought it was one thing and then now he's changed his mind on her. It's easy to feel that way. And I love that you're leading this conversation because that's maybe the natural first inclination. I love that you're leading it with like clearly this whole discussion causes him some element of pain.
And they care. They must, like, the way that the poster framed it at the end, she made it clear that they both care a lot about each other. And that's what makes this really difficult, is because they must clearly value their romantic relationship. And I guess she's really struggling with, do I care enough about being a parent and worry that I'll really regret not doing it enough to leave my partner?
And that resonates with me on like a deeply emotional level, because these are the conversations that Blake and I have had over the course of 8 years. Is we're thriving and happy and feel deeply committed to one another. And when we have a strong difference of a child wanting partner and a child like a leaner inner and a leaner outer towards having children, navigating that is a profoundly painful experience for both parties. And when society is really strongly in the camp of family makes you happy, it's a woman's duty to have children, that will fulfill you, it's really almost like a shameful and lonely spot for the partner leaning out. Because everyone's like,
there's so many.
Leaner out.
oh,
I
you
feel like
haven't?
there's so many like cultural stigmas in her post though, because you have the woman is supposed to have the baby and the right and nurturing and caring and stuff like that. You have the husband, like it could be a patriarchal thing, like it could land on him if they should have kids or not. Divorce is a huge thing. We don't know what her background is, if they believe in divorce or not.
She
and
said there's significant shame coming from family
Shame,
if
so
they
there
were
you
to
go.
take that route. She does.
And then you have as in mid-30s woman getting remarried and back in the
Finding
dating
a
scene.
new partner.
How long has she been together? Has she ever used Tinder? Has she ever
Yeah,
like
my
8
goodness.
any
years
dating
of
apps
being
and
with
like
your person.
you
You're
know, I've
not
heard horror
wrong.
stories. So there's so many. Like she probably has a lot of
You
pressure
put
to
way
stay.
too much thought in this.
I was thinking through it.
It's
yeah.
really-
I'm
You put a great
invested.
amount of thought
I'm
into
And
invested.
and thank you for bringing those things up, because when I have sat down personally and privately to consider like pros and cons and what decisions I should make to have my life be my own and be the most empowered that I can, it's not only about future children and Blake. I feel I have no guarantee for my life that just because I were to separate from Blake, that it still is promised to me. So it's not like, oh, well, I'm like, let me move away from Blake, and then all of a sudden I'm going to find my perfect person, and together they're going to love it and want to have a baby on the exact same timeline as me.
Courtney is the leaner inner.
Yeah.
I'm the leaner outer.
As
just
editor
for
note.
context, yeah.
That is super scary, because I read all the comments on
But
Reddit, and people were like,
Now he's
ditch him, divorce him, like he's holding you
Well,
back.
now
And I'm
I'm
like, there's
thinking
no
about-
guarantee on the other
now I'm
side.
thinking about even more. This is where her resentment comes from with the idea of how he spends his time, because she's not in her mind being able to spend her time with her kids,
Yeah.
and that's why
Her
that's where the
ideal, how I would
resentment's
like to
coming
spend my
from.
time.
Mm-hmm.
I can't tell you how much that resonates. I mean, that's so real. Like, okay, and you can't do halfway. There's no halfsies. There's no compromise.
So
on
what would
having
your
a kid.
advice be?
But
to
here's
her?
the thing. I don't think
I
that
love you
people's
asked that. Welcome back. But
I
go
don't
ahead.
think people's like response to the comments of saying like leave him. I agree. Maybe you don't like the reason why they're saying leave him, but I definitely feel like she shouldn't be with him. They have.
I absolutely agree.
I like everyone's leaving him because like he lied to you. He's not giving you what you want. That is not the reason why I think she
Yeah.
should leave him. I think they should leave because they
Divergent,
want
yeah.
completely different things. They want completely different things, and it seems like he's saying yes to say yes because he really wants to keep her, not because he wants it.
I agree.
And so in a way, if I was that spouse, I don't think I would want.
She says that.
So-
I don't want to have a baby with someone who's having a baby for me.
Yes, and like I've told you that a bunch of times. Every single time we've made that decision, I'm like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Like, kind of thing. Don't like. I think even we've been thinking about whether or not we want to have another kid, and you came to me like, "I don't think I want to try right now." I was like, "Okay, good. I love that you said something because now, like, not that I didn't want to have another kid at that time, but it was like I want to make sure that we both are on the same page." And so I think that she should leave him,
I agree.
not because she doesn't love him, not because he like lied to her, not because he's not giving her anything. I just think because they want completely different things, that she's not going to be happy. He's not going to be happy. Someone's going to be giving in, and someone will be feeling like they were pushed into it. Whether or not that doesn't mean
Child
that.
free or child.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that they might not be able to like make it work. Someone may be able to be happy and like make it work and everything be fine, but like wanting to take that chance on your marriage and on that child, no, who wants to do that? And so I think she should leave him, but like it doesn't have to be like a horrible divorce or anything like that. I think it's just two people who realize like they want different things and just like as
parting of ways.
Yeah, parting ways, which is sad because it seems like they really love each other. They're like Blake said, like they were crying together, and it makes me really sad. And the fact that he's saying, "I'm willing to try. Let's try for a kid," it's because he really loves her and
he
doesn't want to
probably
leave.
actually knows he doesn't want one, and it really
He
genuinely
said a
loves
couple
her.
years. He's
And
kicking
he's
it
saying,
down the
please give
road.
me some
Yeah.
time to sit with this, because I can realize now, like, you're literally going to walk away, and I really love you. I'm willing to change
It's
me
so
being
sad.
sure I don't want a kid because I know I want you.
It
And
almost-
he's in a tough spot too.
Mm-hmm.
It almost feels too simplistic. Like as we were thinking about approaching this kind of an episode, to just say like, do not have children if you do not want to have children. But like if it's maybe it's too early for Hey There Parenthood rules, but one of the first ones should be do not
Big
have
letters on
children
the screen.
if you
Rule
don't
number
want
1:
to.
cut to Blake's face.
Well, I understand situations can be complicated. Like, I mean, with Courtney's work, we see people who, through like kinship and through crazy circumstances, are caring for
removal
children
from home. Yeah.
that they didn't plan on having themselves. So, like, that's such a nuanced thing. But
Mm-hmm.
if you're planning on, I mean, if you're in a partnership or whatever your situation is, and you're by yourself and you want to have a kid, like, obviously, don't do that.
Like the poster, like you're
Yeah, if
telling
you-
the person that posted, like
Yeah.
in that situation.
Yeah, like I think all parties involved in the decision-making process to have a child should obviously do it only if they want to.
Okay,
Like,
not
of
rule
course.
number 1. We'll say
Yeah.
discussion conclusion number 1.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
all
yeah.
consensus on.
But I like rules. I want.
But I do have a
Rule.
bonus
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
I would, if we could add a little asterisk at the bottom. What if they already had one kid?
Yeah.
What if they already had one kid and it was the same exact story, but she was talking about her second child or a second child?
Same thing.
Wouldn't
Wait.
that change?
I
No.
think it.
The
I think it
conclusion.
changes
I think
because
Do you think it
you're
changes?
co-parenting a human
does.
life now. You're not just parting ways amicably.
You
You're
still
that
can part
child's
ways
parent.
amicably, even if you have a child.
No, I understand. I just think it's a much more nuanced layer of consideration I would give as a parent. I'm very pro separation if it's the healthier option for both. 100%. I don't think it's detrimental to children.
Hey there, parenthood. Rule number 2: divorce is cool.
No.
if it works for you.
No,
Off the record. Let's take that off
On the
the
record,
But
off
it's-
the record,
it's-
divorce is
divorce is
fine.
cool.
Like,
it's
there's no shame in
impactful.
divorcing.
I don't
There
think
is no
it's
shame though.
it's
really,
not-
I'm
Go
not
for it,
for it,
yeah.
but there's no shame. in
There
divorce.
shouldn't be shame.
Let's bring
There
divorce
is shame.
back.
there
in
is
it.
shame.
Okay,
There
but
is
yeah.
shame, but
Yes,
there's
like
like
as a cultural institution, whether it's because of religious pressure or social pressure, there's definitely a lot of shame in getting divorced, but there shouldn't be.
And it's undeniable, if not harmful, certainly impactful. Like your child will without a doubt be impacted by having their parents not be like simultaneously in the household co-parenting them. Not good or bad necessarily, but impacted, yes. It's not the exact same as having a 2-parent household. For even the stress levels of your single parent when they're doing it by themselves, it's just going to be different.
Why do you feel like so I think the three of us, Jeena, feel like it is slightly different if there's already a kid involved, like Drue saying. Why do you feel like it isn't?
Yeah, you feel like it's the exact same thought process?
I think it's the exact same thought process, and I think this is one of the things that we've talked about in the past. Is I don't think that you should stay in a marriage just for a child ever.
No,
And
I agree.
Yeah,
but keep
in
going.
these circumstances, they still love each other.
They
Let's
still
establish
they
that,
still
yeah.
love each other. It still brings up a lot of resentment, a lot of issues, like, and I think in a way of like because of like the relationship between the parents, that everything is not great, where everything's not good, where they feel like they're both equally like being able to feel heard or both having their needs want. That in the end, it still will impact the child that's in their home. So even if they still stay together, it still will end up like making changes in that marriage where if one person's really miserable, really unhappy because they feel like their needs are not getting met. I want to have another child.
Yeah.
He says no, or she says no, and now I'm stuck in this marriage because of this kid. I don't see how that's better. I really,
No,
really
I
don't.
agree with your conclusion.
So-
I think I just see it that
I
everyone
think
think
it
about
goes
it the
deeper.
exact same way.
I think it still goes deeper than that though, because there's things with your partner, like whether you're married or not, there's challenges that you're going to face that you have to decide, is this a challenge we're going to tackle together and get through and grow through? Or is this a challenge that like separates us and we need to go separate ways?
But then why does that change
So-
if there's a child already there? That should be done whether or not there's a
I
child
think
there.
it impacts me because there's decent research, and it may be dated. I'm most familiar with like strong research that came out post 70s when couples divorced at a higher frequency. So through the 80s and 90s, divorce rates increased. And so, I mean, really since the 50s and 60s, right? We've seen a pretty steady climb towards more frequent divorces. So they started to do some research on what is the impact of this, like on children's psychology, on their development, their well-being. And I would say it leans heavily not on the inherent impacts of divorce, but on the shame and stigma around it. That's where the most negative impacts come from. I don't think the research that I'm like loosely familiar with insinuates that, but that's my take on it. But the conclusions are that children are inherently almost always like negatively impacted by that choice.
Like a
I
balancing
wouldn't
act,
stay
yeah.
for my child. I couldn't agree more with you. The conclusion you drew, I agree with. Waiting around for a child in an unhealthy, unmatched, my needs aren't being met marriage is not the healthiest option for the child, in my opinion. Again, I'd love some more like data to see if people have looked into that. But I don't think I would just say, does my spouse want the same thing as me? And we already have a child together. I'm going to go find the thing that I want and not consider the fact that we're going to be forever co-parenting this child that we already have, especially if it comes to the primary reason I'm leaving this relationship is to have more children with a new partner.
But it's hard because you're also saying that you would want to see the data and like helping you make the decision. Well, that's not bad either.
It can't tell you what's right.
It can't tell you what's right.
And it won't.
I think that's because we've had fun, like, I think with this very like distinct edge case, and we've thought up little rules and stuff, and I will walk everything back. But I do think that this third basket of like, how do you reach a conclusion that feels right with the other people involved? How do I know whether it's that I need to leave my partner because they don't want to have a kid, or they don't want to have a second kid? Like, how do I feel good that I'm making a decision I won't regret? And if the stakes are high and you're trying to make a choice, and there is like having a child, there's a good chance you may regret it either way.
Having a child is this experience that on the front end, you have to decide, I cannot know how it will impact me, and I cannot know what my life will look like. And I'm going to decide to do it anyways. And the exact same thing can be said for remaining child-free. I cannot know how that's going to impact me, how I'll feel, and the opportunity will pass. So if you would like, for biological children, asterisk, for having a child out of your own body or conceiving your own child, just when you're hitting like late 40s, 50, like if all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, oh my gosh, like that is a pivotal part of my life experience that I'm determined to have. You just aren't going to. You just can't, right? Only very few in novel experiences or cases that would be happening. So the door has closed. Whether you closed it or time closed it, it closed. And you can't know when you're 27 saying, do I want to live a child-free life? And talking with your new fiance or whomever, you know, I'm not really vibing with children. I think I'm going to say no. And they agree, and you determine at 30, we're going to be a child-free couple. Like, you cannot know how you're going to feel about that later. And there are certain experiences that we go through in life that we're trying to make them with the data and the research and the talking to our friends and the what can I do, the journal writing, like
Technically, you
to
don't
try
even
and make
know
a
who your
decision.
kids are going to be.
You can't know.
There's nothing that's a guaranteed. Like that's why I was like, even if with the data, how's that going to really help you with the decision on like whether or not to stay with your spouse? If you have a child, if you don't have a child, honestly, there's like no right or wrong answer.
Yeah.
Because even when I was deciding if I wanted to have a child, I knew that I knew nothing about the child that was going to come into our lives. All 5 of them. I think maybe even like Tiger, technically we could have known a little bit more information, but there was nothing that was going to make me decide, oh, well, like with this information that I don't want to take care of her because she was family, she needed a home. And so like I knew that I definitely could be.
It wasn't like you're weighing the pros and cons before saying yes. Like, what's her personality?
Yes.
What are her tendencies? Is she annoying? Is she like before having a child?
Technically,
and you can't do that about biological children.
Yeah.
Like, there's no checklist of like pick and choose, create your own child.
You can't. I mean, I guess you can. Maybe with science. I don't want that science. To keep that science away from me because I really don't care. Because I definitely knew that I wanted to be a mom. I've always been the type of person, and this is me. And so this is how I've done it, where like I feel like I'm very blessed and lucky to be the person guiding whoever that person ends up being, even if they end up being someone who could never say I love you, could never do anything. I'm taking care of them. That was still me making that choice to bring them into this life. So then it's definitely my responsibility. Me being lucky or blessed is like me being able to take care of them and them being in my lives. That's like the lucky blessed thing. I'm not expecting any of my kids to have kids. I told them this a bunch of times. Like if they choose to have kids, great. I think that's just like maybe the cherry on top is like them being able to
like
do the
cool
same.
bonus. If
Doing the same and taking care
I think many grandparents
and like
feel
putting
that way.
them first. It's like the extra cherry on top. And so if we're looking at it in a way of like we're expecting something out of it to have a child and like expecting like them to love us or to give us something.
Also reading a book that I will absolutely hope the name can be dropped in the description because it's changed my life is The Baby Decision, and written by a social worker that I really admire the way she approaches inviting her readers to consider their why. And she really clearly walks through child-free living and the impact that may have and helping you explore through a lot of curious like question asking and then child rearing and child bringing into the world. Anyways, I read this book, and through either talking with my therapist or reading this book and trying to puzzle out for our relationship and for my own life, the thing that emerged was I don't know how much exploration of why I had done. As a woman that was really raised religiously and where family is really centric to not only my own sense of identity, but also my value in the world, my place in the world, where I would find belonging, purpose. I had internalized some of those things in ways that I didn't quite know until I started to ask myself, why would I want to have children? And if it comes down to leaving a partnership where I'm like thriving and happy and fulfilled, really, I better know why. And considering that was unpacking a lot of those belief systems about identity and self. Having those things prompted to me invited significant introspection and reflection. And for the first time in my life in that process, it didn't feel like grief to consider a child-free life. I was honest enough with myself to recognize that I like
kind of an idealized view.
Yeah, it's easy to have an idealized view, but then it also helped me be honest that it's something that is important to me to be in a mothering role in my life. And that's the concrete like rock bottom that I hit, that I was like, okay, that's a value of mine. And does it have to be I birth a biological child? Does it have to be that I adopt a child or I foster a child? Or like, does it have to look in XYZ way? Or is it actually that I value my inherent ability and desire to be in a mothering role in children's lives? And then that opened up this huge expansion of ways I can be a mother in the world. As I take that chapter by chapter and section by section, I'm always able to live like those parts of me that long to be a mother, truly like exponential. I mean, I can't say the peace that's brought me, and how Blake and I now, I think how that's alleviated so much pressure for Blake, because I found my own why, my own healing. And if it ever in next year, 6 months or 10 years looks like me biologically having a child and that doesn't work for Blake, I'll feel empowered and peaceful about moving forward there. Right. But I didn't come to that conclusion. I came to this broader sense, and it's just brought a lot of healing for us to be on the same timeline, different timelines, because Blake did that same process in your own life, right? Of what is your why?
Yeah, and I think Drue, maybe you mentioned it. Like, there's so much cultural pressure to like have a child and raise it. Like, it just becomes an expectation. But like, you just don't have to do that. And I'm not. This wasn't your experience at all, Courtney, but I do know friends who have examined that and been like, oh, it's not that I wanted to have a child. I just felt I was supposed to. And that can be liberating for some people.
It's like the next right thing, right?
Yeah.
But according to who?
That's so sad that someone's making a choice or making a decision based on what they think is like what they're supposed to do. Being a parent or not being a parent isn't the only decision that we make, like, or only big decision that we make that we feel like pressured into.
Yeah.
There are a lot of decisions like that I feel like a lot of people are making because they feel like they have to, not because they want to. And that's just genuinely sad.
Or I know some people worry like, well, what about when I'm old? You know, like if I don't have
I think
children,
that's the
like
primary
what kind of belonging will I
concern.
have?
Will I feel purpose? Will I feel satisfaction with my life?
You know what I realized? We haven't even talked about the reason why some people have children. And isn't because of the pressure, but because they feel like I need to have someone who's going to take care of me when they're older. And
Absolutely.
that is really sad as well, because you're putting this expectation on this child to be caring for you at this old age. And it's like, that's the only reason why you want to have them in your life. Like, they're making decisions, like these big decisions for a lot of reasons. And maybe I'm realizing maybe it's not so child-centered. I can definitely say like some of the reasons why I decided to have kids is somewhat selfish, because I really just wanted to be like someone there for them with unconditional support that I don't feel like I got as a teenager or as a child. And so I wanted to be able to do that for our kids. I know it's selfish, but I'm also like always trying to be child-centered in the reasons and what I do. And I'm realizing a lot of people are making these decisions. It's not like child-centered reasons.
Yeah, but I think that was almost Courtney's whole point, is making sure it's your authentic self that's making that decision, which in a lot of ways is very selfish. It's all about you. And so, but unless you can do that, you're going to have a lot of regret.
Yeah.
A lot more complications later on in life, because you're not sticking to your authentic self. And then you're either having to change what those core values are for yourself, or
To
you're
adapt
having to,
around and
you're
a
having
decision that
to
can't
fake it,
change.
which creates a whole nother level of issues.
It's just worth noting how painful and isolating and lonely a process it can be to go back and unravel all those layers of expectations and ideologies. And just like maybe you've never learned how to ask yourself, what do I want and what's important to me, and how do we understand how much of that is influenced by other people, your religion, your parents, watching different parenting dynamics in different households. I just feel like that's a thing that it feels, from my loose observation of those that I've had, the parents that feel no matter what life throws at them, it's still kind of, they're able to be resilient about it, is those that had a little bit of headspace to be like, yeah, I do want that. What is important to me? Who am I? And those that are just kind of responding and reactive to their role as a parent. Parenting is a big enough role that if you're always just like trying to make it okay and like adapt to it, it's going to take a lot out of you.
Yeah, I mean, the gay couples we know that have had kids had to very intentionally choose to have children.
Like $40,000.
And they're like the most well-adjusted parents I meet, because
there's a study on that.
Yeah,
like
I agree.
Like, it came at great personal sacrifice to make that happen, you know, but a lot of our conversation has focused on, you know, cis-het couples that are choosing to have biological children. But I think a lot of what we're talking about here extends to just that decision for anyone, whether they're in a couple or
single parents,
or they're not
unpartnered.
or they're not of the monogamous, you know, persuasion, persuasion, or we have someone that we're close to that is a single mother, just by choice because they're unpartnered or whatever it looks like. I think when culture makes this decision for you, it's really, really challenging. Totally agree with you, Jeena. Like, not examining your motivations for doing something this large is a recipe for a lot of risk. Like, a lot of risk for how you feel about it.
I want to throw something in because as we continue to talk about it, and this might be some of the nurse, is Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and like finding out who you are and self-actualization and stuff like that. That's actually comes in this after love and belonging.
Yeah.
So the by this, and in case you guys don't know what Maslow hierarchy of needs is, it's a pyramid, and you have to hit the bottom before you can move to the next one. Yeah. And so the bottom one is psychological needs: food, water, shelter, clothing, sleep. Once you have that, you can go to safety and security, which is health, employment, property, family, and social ability. So kind of that social aspect. And then the next one is love and belonging, which is friendship, family, intimacy, and sense of connection. So that's partner in that natural cultural, like, let's have babies and let's have a family and grow a family. After that is self-esteem, which is confidence, achievement, respect of others, and need to be unique individually. So I don't think it's abnormal as a human to think of yourself after you think of family planning. Like, what is my true self?
And this point you're bringing up, I'm really, really grateful you did, because the conversation of to parent or to not parent is a conversation of privilege. So individuals that don't have the ability, because their basic needs are not met, to sit back and be like, you know what are my values? What are my goals? When you're in situations where that thought process and that headspace isn't being fostered, or it can't be because you're hungry or you don't have a place to live, then the deep intellectual thinking of to parent or not, or what would that look like, is it's not in the forefront of your mind, because it can't be, because your basic needs aren't met.
Or the privilege could also just be you're fertile and someone else might not be. So this looks very different. I know there's still obviously avenues for adopting or fostering, but just like that, being able to honestly ask, like, should I have a biological child, is fortuitous, right?
Absolutely.
It's not guaranteed.
These are painful, painful questions. And I hope we can acknowledge that all throughout this podcast, like how triggering and intimate and painful so many topics we discuss may be. Maybe an individual is in a same-sex relationship or queer relationship, and they would do anything, but they don't have access to the finances. It's always going to take thousands of dollars. And
I can say that I was very naive to that, because Drue's brother and his partner, like, we were just talking about kids, and they so badly want to have kids, and
finances.
And finances is really much what's stopping them. Drue's brother is much like Drue, where, oh my goodness, he would be a fantastic dad. But they're like, oh, we have to go through IVF and a surrogacy, and that's just like, I mean, I think he said 140, 130K.
Something, 6 figures easy.
Logically, I know, right? I know this, but then hearing them talk about it was just really sad, because I just think that they would make great parents. It's just really sad that the thing that's stopping them is finances.
It's not like an equitable experience to become a parent.
So like, there's these concerns about if this is right for me, is this right for my partner? Can we do it? Do we have the finances? But what about like social concerns? Is it a selfish act to have a child in an industrialized country like ours? Are there environmental concerns? Are we worried about societal issues? Like, do we want to take that on, or do we want to save that?
I have a very point blank answer to that.
Yeah.
One, we're very privileged. I'm very privileged to be able to answer this way or whatever, but in a lot of ways, I don't feel like those outside concerns you should think about them, but I don't think they should ultimately affect whether you have children or not. Because there's always going to be something going on somewhere, somehow. Now, I'm not saying like if you're in the middle of like an active war, should you just be like, YOLO, baby? And like, it doesn't matter. Like this, or in the middle of a famine and know that you won't be able to feed this child and just go for it. But I mean, the environment, and I'm not sure about economy, and things are getting expensive, and those things are always going to be happening somewhere, somehow. And so for me, I just feel like that's a never ending
list of reasons not to.
This is something else that's going to happen.
I think in an ideal world, which unfortunately we don't have, but like, I think this is a question of human dignity. Like, in an ideal world, I want to believe that it would be on the principle of human dignity alone, such a personal decision or a partnership decision or whatever unit is going to raise this child together, that in a total vacuum without any concern for like the distribution of resources in a society, impending conflict or whatever it is, that this decision is so special and so at the core of being human. Like humans reproduce biologically as a species, and if we don't, we also take part in the raising of other people's children. Like we're these very communal organisms. I agree, like on principle, absolutely. I think that it's wrong from a human rights point of view, kind of regardless of where you are. Like this is a question of human dignity, and I believe every human to be truly dignified deserves reproductive freedom. And there have been places where those rights have been stripped from people. But I also try to wonder, how do you balance that with the fact that we live on a finite planet and we're in a society that consumes more per capita than any other society? I think that those are sobering questions to think about. And I can't have answers for other people.
As a whole, that we're all becoming more educated. Also, we're having a lot of our needs met, that we're realizing that just because it's our right, like to have children, doesn't mean we have to.
Exercise it.
We don't have to exercise it. And so I think as a society, and at least maybe here in the U.S., we're recognizing that we don't have to have children. I think a lot of people are realizing that there's societal pressure, I don't want to. And I don't think that's wrong. And I'm glad that people are starting to make those decisions based on what their needs and wants are. But I think as a whole, like there are a lot of people who are deciding to be child free. I think it's like this way of, while all of it is valid, and I'm glad that a lot of people are making that decision. I don't think that they're wrong. Also making sure like, well, I made the opposite decision. And I also want to make sure that both people understand and respect both decisions, that no one's feeling like shame or feeling they're wrong for making a decision to not have children, or making the decision to have children, or having the decision to have a lot of children as well.
Yeah, you're saying like reproductive rights is like, it swings both ways. Mm-hmm. Like we're guaranteeing someone's reproductive rights, like in the ability for contraception or abortion, but we're also guaranteeing the rights and the dignity associated with choosing to have children.
Mm-hmm. Morally and ethically, I agree with you. Yeah. But I think Blake's element of like finite resources is where this gets very triggering for individuals that have chosen to not have children because they've crunched the numbers and made a decision. It's not always a personal decision. It's often a social decision.
Yeah. There are many ways to experience parenthood.
Yeah.
And I don't know like if there's a kind of like cute term for it, but like where Courtney and I have landed is that we're like parent diverse.
You're like the aunties and uncles.
Yeah, exactly. And
unsure where that'll take us.
In a really intimate way. And also like we could take that further, and I've actively discussed fostering or potentially even adoption. We happen to have our own fertility issues. But we like, there's just a lot of satisfaction. Like being godparents is so great and worked out so well for us and kind of our personal,
it's like the joy of
stuff.
Our life.
Yeah, like that.
The
I feel
honor of our life.
deeply satisfied, but because I'm also a sleepy gal, like I can go home. A type of interaction with child rearing that brings me like great fulfillment. It adds meaning to my life, and it embeds me in a community of people where even though I don't, I feel I share blood with.
You're basically saying that all the kids we have are making up for you guys. That way,
yeah,
that we're a bit,
kind of.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
you just like plugged in.
Yeah,
we'll
so
take 2.
we have
you
2.5.
guys take 3. Yeah.
No, 2.5. We'll cut 1.5.
Off the record.
To that point,
Scratch that.
To that point, Blake, I really appreciate that you said that, because in my whole greater scheme, like I think that's what I was trying to allude to, is like this mothering, and I use mothering because that's my gender and like my gender identity and how I express it, but like parenting for any identity.
I use the androgynous parenting.
Thank you, Blake. Any person who's interacting with children to support them, uplift them, be there for them, take care of their material needs, like help them become a functioning adult, right? In whatever capacity that looks like. There's such a plethora of ways to do that I just, in my younger years and earlier age, it was solely mothering a biological child. And I wasn't exposed to or didn't have a lot of thought process around the ways that my talents and my tendencies and my nature, I mean, I had no idea, even my profession. It's a huge point of privilege that social workers were off my radar. Like I just didn't know what a social worker did. I didn't really know who they were. I definitely didn't know I would want to continue into graduate studies in social work because I didn't know the profession existed, but I couldn't have imagined a better way to spend the vast majority of my time. All my waking hours, day in and day out, the things I care about, think about, eat, breathe, is helping children thrive.
I feel like as we wrap up this episode, I really want to hear from like our audience to see like what their thoughts are on this, because I know like this is going to be something that a lot of people will feel very strongly about.
Yeah.
And I know that just because as someone who is like the very opposite of, we've decided to have a lot of children, and you guys have also had like your eyes are the opposite of us who decided not to have any children, that people feel very, very strongly.
Currently, we're not conclusively child free. We just currently don't have any
child
children.
Off the record.
Yeah. Scratch that from the record.
Well, I'm just saying in a sense,
Yeah.
right now you guys have
Yeah.
like you do not have children, that people feel very strongly, and I know this will be something that a lot of people will have a lot of strong feelings about, and I'd love to hear from all of you guys, because it seems like we've come to the conclusion that there's no right or wrong answer. There's no, and
come to
course
no
not, right?
come to
Of
no
course.
conclusions
I
in the
know.
course of this podcast.
Because even as like I'm sure like we were reading the Reddit stories, and like we saw all of the reasonings and what people were feeling about like whether or not they were the asshole or whether or not they were right or wrong. Like,
what should I do? Yeah.
like it seems like even though one of them, they all came to this conclusion like she probably should leave that husband. We came to different reasonings from what they said why she should leave from what we said why she should leave. And so it seems like even though maybe that was the right answer for that situation, right, the reasonings behind it were so different. And it just shows how this sadly is going to be like one of those things that there's no answer, and which I despise as a person who loves having direct answers. Like,
I mean, I think
yes,
Blake
no, this, yes.
said it best as well, though, is like we should all have the human dignity to choose for ourselves.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a deeply personal choice
Mm-hmm.
that should be protected and have the space for everyone to come to